Oh, yeah. Hello to everybody.
Sounds like Geshe.
Hello, Geshe.
Hello, Geshe.
Hello, Geshe.
Hello. Hello.
Tidele, Geshe.
Still there. Oh, yeah. So today I can, go through all the pages to see the faces, because last time my computer didn't work, so I had to rely on my iPad, which is difficult to see all the faces. So today I can see. So, okay, great.
Quite a lot of people.
Yeah.
Yes, good. Okay.
Good.
Oh, yeah. So we are going to start the gathering. Oh, yeah. And we will start with the reading the Refuge and Bodhicitta lines. By reading verbally, saying the lines, mentally holding the Refuge and the Bodhicitta from our heart very strongly and very clearly as a part of our motivation, intention to join this gathering, and in general, as a part of training ourselves, training our minds to hold these two amazingly helpful mental states, realizations, as a part of our everyday way of thinking, as a Buddhist practitioner or follower of the teachings of the Buddha. And as I think most of you know, there are different what you call the prayers, or there are different lines to explain or to express refuge and bodhicitta, but commonly in the Tibetan, the Buddhist tradition, these four lines, Sanje Chötang Soki Chongnam Changjo Parto Dangni Yapsuche Dagi Jinso Jive Tsongnamji Dola Penji Sanje Juba Sho. These four lines are commonly said to help us to hold these two mental states. And when we say these two lines, the first line, Sanje Chötang Tsokji Chok, that is Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha, the three refuge objects, three that we go for refuge, taking refuge. And when we say the Buddha, or fully awakened being or beings, we should have a strong and a clear understanding of the qualities of the Buddhas or Buddha, those fully awakened beings. And basically, those fully awakened beings, being in that kind of what you call that kind of being, through the cultivation of great compassion and wisdom, they are not fully awakened beings right at the beginning. at the beginning, they are like us, struggling in, under the power of suffering and the origins of suffering. But then, through the cultivation of great compassion and wisdom, they become fully awakened beings. And not only they are fully awakened beings, and they show, they lead, they teach the paths, to all living creatures without any discriminations, without any exceptions. Some kind of very what you call the basic, the essence of the qualities of the Buddhas, and that is something we should remember that when we say the Buddha, not the image. Of course, image of a statue or image of a Thanga painting, beautiful drawing, that's okay. But mainly when we recall the Buddha or Buddhas, we should recall their inner qualities, and out of those inner qualities, their activities, and their activities are simply to support, to help living beings, as a, we can say as a teacher, as a mentor, and that is important. And Dharma was a Che in Tibetan, and the second refuge object. When we say the word Dharma, I take refuge in Dharma, really to have a clear and strong understanding, feeling of peace. And the Dharma here refers to the path, such as the three trainings, concentration, ethics, and wisdom. Through the cultivation of these three trainings, then end result will be the complete cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering. And that is the peace. That is the peace. When that cessation, the complete cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering is taking place within ourselves, within our mental continuum, then within ourselves there is a genuine, long-lasting peace. And that is the refuge. And the paths that leads to experience that cessation are also the Dharma. So when we say I take refuge in Dharma, we should have that kind of, Dharma as that really total, complete absence or cessation of suffering and origins of suffering. Not something that is also not something something outside there. It is within ourselves that will take place. Within ourselves that will going to happen. And the paths that lead to that cessation is also need to be cultivated within ourselves. So when we say Dharma, the second refuge object, we should recall that kind of things. And the Sangha, the third refuge object, Gindun Tsokyi Chok in here, Tsokyi Chok. Tsok means the community. Chok is sometimes translated supreme. There are different translations. So in other words, Sangha, Gindun So here the Sangha, when we say I take refuge in Sangha, that Sangha, in our what we should have clear picture of Sangha, not as a just external image of ordained monks and nuns or something like that. That is also culturally counts as a Sangha. But mainly is when we say I take refuge in Sangha, the Sangha, we should have a clear understanding of qualities of the Sangha. That means, have the true understanding, true realization of the teachings of the Buddha, such as the Four Noble Truths. And those people to live their life according to those teachings, such as the Four Noble Truths. And not only they themselves live their life according to the teachings, but also they are, without any hesitation, without any holding anything back, but really willingly to want to support others, live honestly, sincerely, and support others who are also in the spiritual journey. So when we say Sangha, we should have that kind of, in our mind, from our heart. Then the second line, Changju Pardo. Changju Pardo. So Changchu, that is enlightenment. Till enlightenment, until enlightenment. Dharma, I, to recall oneself, who is going for refuge. I, as a person, as a, still in samsara, still under the power of suffering and the origins of suffering, So I, Dharma, go for refuge, taking refuge in three truths. That means I take the Buddha or Buddhas as my teacher, mentors. I take refuge in Dharma as a, to cultivate within myself, to actualize, to experience, the path and also the end result, which is the complete cessation of suffering and the origins of suffering. I take refuge in Sangha, those Sangha members, whether they are ordained or non-ordained, but the people who have deep realization of the teachings of the Buddha, and then who live their lives according to the teachings of the Buddha. I take those people as my spiritual friends, supporters, whom that I can associate, whom I would like to associate, whom I would like to learn from them. So that is here, it is important. So in other words, you all know this, I have repeated again and again, but still I will repeat again here today. It is important, us to have a strong, gut feeling going for refuge in three jewels, to have that kind of, the mental strength and the clarity. Then we should have these two understanding of the qualities of the three jewels and the understanding of the, the nature of one's own, this unenlightened existence. When these two understandings are really deepened within our mental continuum, then the determination, then that, the dedication to take refuge will be there within ourselves. And then all the time, that kind of, the determination, taking refuge, Buddha as a teacher, and Dharma as something to be practiced, to be actualized, Sangha as a spiritual friend will be there. Then, whether we verbally say the lines or not, if we are able to live our lives with that mental state, we will feel tremendous sense of what you call the peace, tremendous sense of support and secure, thinking I have a refuge. I have a refuge, which is not only something ease these lives difficulties, but these three refuge will also eventually lead me to completely free from samsara, cyclic existence. So that is really something important. When we say the lines, think, relate ourselves with the meaning of the refuge. And when we say the last two lines, in the last two lines, I take what's Sanji Dagi Jinso Jibe Sonanji Penju Sanji Tuasho. That is the bodhicitta. And the Daki by me. So in other words, in the meaning, whatever virtues that I do, no matter how small, just giving small, cup of tea, glass of water, saying, showing the right direction to somebody who get lost, or anything, small things, no matter how small, but whatever virtues that I do, I have done in the past, I'm doing now, I will do in the future, all those virtues I will dedicate to become the causes and conditions that need to give support to all living beings. To do that, to experience the full enlightenment, So that kind of dollar pencher, that is important. Doa, sentient beings, living beings, pencher, in order to benefit living beings. The main reason, we should have in our mind, main reason to experience or to attain full enlightenment is ourselves being able to serve sentient beings. And that is here important. As I mentioned last week, mentally that is the case. But practically, when we say support, working for the sake of others, we must look at in our everyday life what we can do for others. Others can be just one person or one sentient being, but it is, not to miss that opportunity. And that is something important. Okay, so last two lines. So all the time, being able to hold these two mental states as a part of our main motivation, intention to live this life, to engage in activities, and particularly here, this kind of gathering. And that is important. So now we will say the refuge and the bodhicitta lines. Sangye Chödang Tsoji Chona Chanju Pado Dane Chazo Che Dagi Jinso Jibe Tsona Maji Dola Penje Sangye Robara Sangye Chödang Tsoji Chona Chanju Pado Dane Chazo Che Dagi Jinso Jibe Tsona Maji Dola Penje Sangye Robara Sangye Chödang Tsoji Chona Chanjo Pado Dane Chazo Che Dagi Jinso Jibe Tsona Maji Dola Penje Sangye Dobara Cho. Oh, yeah. Refuge and bodhicitta as our main intention to join this gathering. Now we will say Cherishing Mantra together. And as I think we all know this, yesterday we heard this sad news. A great, Buddhist master, Vietnamese Buddhist master, the Venerable Thich Nhat Hanh passed away peacefully in Vietnam. And, he was one of the most sort of influential Buddhist masters, in our lifetime, and taught some of the most essential teachings of the Buddha to many, many peoples all over the world, and established many helpful, institutions, nunneries, monasteries, and centers to really provide the opportunity to the people to learn some of those very, very helpful teachings of the Buddha, such as the mindfulness meditation, and not only that, very actively, what you call the led, peaceful means to solve the world's problem, the war and difficulties in the world through the peaceful way, peaceful manner. So, many of you, I'm sure, have read some of his great texts. I read, one thick, not fully, but one thick, book written by him about describing different places, Buddhist places in India. Very, very beautifully written. And so, very moving and very, inspiring to read. And like that, he had, reached to many, many people's heart. So now he passed away, and due to that, many people, are in a very emotionally very sad, and maybe in a, some people may get lost. But of course, people who have received deep teachings and put into practice, understand this nature. But of course, there are people who are in a very difficult, emotionally sad, and so forth. So we will, when we say the Cherishing Mantra together, to extend our love, loving kindness, great compassion towards all living beings, and particularly those people who are, currently emotionally going through a very tough time. Those can be a great teacher. Also think, all his projects, activities that he had started, and some
Hi, everyone. It seems like Geshe has had some interference and dropped out, so we'll just try and get him back again. So we just got a message from Geshe to say he's lost the internet connection and he's going to try and get back in touch through his other internet provider. So we'll just wait to see what happens.
We try and hold that place where we're thinking about dedicating those mantras to Thich Nhat Hanh.
Seem to work.
Yeah, it should be. No, it should be for that.
I let him in, but he's gone out again. Yeah.
Sorry, I lost my internet connection. So, yeah, we'll say the mantra. Oh, yeah. Om Mani Mane Oh, yeah. So we are discussing about the purification, or confessing the negativities. One of the the main important practices in Buddha Dharma, in which level that we are following the teachings of the Buddha, either pure Sutrayana without any Vajrayana element, or without any Mahayana teachings, or Mahayana teachings but without any Vajrayana elements, or Vajrayana teachings, at which level, or at which the category of the Buddha's teachings that we are following. Purification practice is always there, and it makes sense. It makes sense, in a worldly, project. If we want to build a building, on the one hand, bring all the building materials, then structure. On the other hand, all the whatever obstacles are there to build a strong, stable building. All those obstacles should be eliminated. And it is the same in our inner spiritual development. On the one hand, enhance those constructive, healthy, the mental states, such as loving kindness, bodhicitta, great compassion, wisdom, tolerance, patience, all those mental qualities. And with those mental qualities, engaging physically, verbally, engaging in virtuous activities in whatever form that might be. Those virtuous activities might be very traditional, manner, such as lighting candlelights, or any other things, or something which is not necessarily traditionally counts as a spiritual activities, but in reality serving others, supporting other beings. with those loving kindness, great compassion, or wisdom, patience, tolerance. And that is the one hand. That's the one. On the other hand is, the really minimizing, reducing, if it's possible, eradicating those unhealthy mental states, or technically called, in Tibetan, Nyunmong, afflictions, to really reduce them, such as anger, hatred, jealousy, envy, ignorance, strong grasping, self-centered mind, really to reducing them through the application of antidotes, many different ways. And that is here our, this program, during this our gathering, that is our main focus, which I briefly mentioned last week. So to do that, structurally, which I briefly touched on the structure of purification, those 4 powers. And I mentioned those 4 powers are requirement necessary in which level that we do the purification. Pure Sutrayana or the highest Vajrayana teachings. In which form, in which kind of, the meditation manual that we use, to do the purification. These 4 powers are basic necessities. If one of those 4 powers are not there in our purification, then it is difficult, although that activity will be very, very helpful. But whether that activity will really fully be able to eradicate the negativities, are not, is very questionable. So, which I briefly mentioned the other day, which I want to remind you, importance of having those 4 powers. Now, the other thing is very, very helpful and useful is, to understand, to recognize, to understand, the nature and function of those afflictions, such as anger, such as hatred. These are the very strong words, or grasping, self-centered mind, egoistic mind, to really to understand their nature, their function, how they arise, and the consequences of their what you call occurrence. When we understand the quite well about these afflictions, their nature, their functions, their consequences, then within ourselves there will be a strong what you call there will be determination to really deal with them, to really want to tackle with them, because at the end of the day we all love ourselves, we all care ourselves, and that is nothing wrong to love ourselves, to care ourselves. There's no contradiction, that kind of deep sense of caring to ourselves with the bodhicitta, with the altruistic awakened mind. If we cannot love ourselves, if we cannot care ourselves, it is impossible we can have a strong mind, want to care others, want to love others. That is impossible. So that, because at the end of the day, we love ourselves, we care ourselves, then when we understand these afflictions, these distorted mental states are very, very unhelpful to ourselves and to others, then of course, in a very common sense, we want to, keep them as distant as possible. We want to make them as less as possible. That is very much that kind of what you call the mechanism is inbuilt in our psyche. We don't need to teach that much. I always give this example. I think 1987, when I was in Nepal, and that year, the Lama Ursel came to Kopan in Nepal for his first enthronement ceremony after recognized as Lama Yeshe's reincarnation. And I was there, and because this is, I didn't go deliberately there, but I was there that whole year. And so I participated with that enthronement ceremony. And this small young Spanish boy, put on big throne and with wearing all this, very uncomfortable, unfamiliar, robes. And on the big table, there were so many, what you call the nice things to eat. And suddenly, which is the tradition, suddenly, on his table, there is a beautiful, nice, very ornate teacup, with a very ornate sort of, I don't know what you call it in English. And there was, somebody bring a very hot tea, which is the tradition, So there's, but he really wants to drink. And now the Spanish nun, I think she passed away quite some time ago. Her name is Venerable Glory. And she was attendant. Lama Ursel's attendant. There were several, but she was the main attendant. And the first time Lama Ursel tried to reach to the teacup, and she said something, I think I would show in Spanish, push his hand back and ask him, to stay, to wait a bit. But he insists. And then in our horror, she picked up the cup and give it to him. And that, of course, burned his, lips. And after that, he never, go close to that teacup. So he learned the lesson. So that is the sign. That is the sign. We have, innate build that mechanism. When we understand that is something is not really helpful, we will keep distance from that. That is the clear example. Even children can do that. So many of us, we still keep, this self-centered mind, the egoistic mind, attachment, jealousy, envy, very much in our psyche. Then when they occur, when they arise, we act according to their demand, because we don't, either we don't pay attention or we don't know that well how unhealthy they are, how destructive they are, how destructive they are. And that is, here to do the purification practice, particularly out of those 4 powers, the second power of regret, to have the deep sense of genuine from our heart to arise deep sense of regret. We have to have that kind of understanding. Then we will know. the Shantideva, in his Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, he said, that nobody will sort of, hold poison snake in their lap unless if they are crazy. If a poison snake is in our lap, there's no time to relax. We should try to get rid of that snake as soon as possible. Why we do that? Because we know if that bites, that is lethal. So that sort of things we need. That sort of thing. And to do that, we need to understand how destructive these afflictions are. Not only right here and now, in this lifetime, today, next week, next month, next year, next decade, but also next life after, life after. Until we are able to, uproot like the 3 poisons from our psyche, they will all the time cause us difficulties. So that kind of understanding is helpful, useful. And I'm sure many of you have, some, I know some of you have done, FPT, Foundational Buddhist Thought, in the 3rd module, Buddhist psychology. There are these lists of afflictions. Some are very, very much, what's called deep-rooted our psychic. Some are very much in surface. That is important. That is important. That is important to do the purification practice. It is, of course, having clear visualization of Vajrasattva, which is clearly mentioned in this meditation manual that we are going to read. Vajrasattva visualization is required to do the purification based on Vajrasattva. But the visualization alone will not do the actual purification, though it will help us to have a focus, to have a concentration, but that alone will not help us. Buddha clearly stated, in his one of the most famous texts, which called in Tibetan is called Cherishing Mantra, Dhammapada. Tumnam depa chui mitushin, droedungi chagi misela, niji topa shenla pomini, chuni demba dembe tolaju. These 4 lines, very, very beautiful and powerful statements. Tupnam, that means those Buddhas, the Buddhas or awakened beings will not, will not, what's called wash your afflictions, by pouring water upon you. Pouring water. Neither awakened beings will not, remove living beings suffering by their hands. They can't do that. Similarly, awakened beings, their own realizations cannot give it to the living beings. So they can't do those three to support, to help living beings. Cannot wash the living beings, what you call the afflictions, by pouring water, blessing water upon their heads. That cannot be done. Neither, and neither awakened beings, cannot remove living beings' suffering by their hands. Same, they cannot transfer their realizations to the living beings. And the last line, the fourth line, Chuni Dempa Dembe Cholatu. The living beings will be liberated only, giving teachings, truth, showing the paths that leads to liberation. So awakened beings, Buddhas, no matter how strong compassion they are, no matter how deeply dedicated they are to support living beings, they can't do by pouring waters, by their hands, taking away the sufferings, because they can't transform. But what they can do, they can teach. So here, that is the first three lines are very, very important to when we talk about purification. Purification. Our affliction, those afflictions, and the propensities of the afflictions, and the seeds, propensities, of the previous our actions, negative actions, unhealthy actions that we had committed due to the afflictions, led by the afflictions. Those propensities will remain within ourselves, will remain within our mental continuum. No matter how, very powerful blessing water pour upon our, head for 24 hours, the affliction cannot be, removed, cannot be washed. And those propensities of those unhealthy karma that we have committed will not washed away by pouring blessing waters. Though blessing waters are helpful, psychologically, but in reality, these blessing water cannot wash our afflictions. Same, so here, then what we can do? Here we can apply the antidote. We can apply the antidote. Through application of antidote by ourselves, the application, the antidotes that Buddha had, the historical Buddha had taught, other awakened beings have taught, those great teachers have taught, through application. So those are something very, very important, what's called points that we should remember when we talk about purification. So last time, we talked about, briefly touch on those four powers, power of reliance, power of regret, power of actual antidote, and the power of, the determination not to commit same actions again. So the first one, the power of reliance or power of, base, foundation. So here, this one, now we are looking at the Vajrasattva sadhana, Vajrasattva meditation manual that has, there are many forms. Here we are using the Vajrasattva solitude without consort. But the people who have received highest yoga tantra initiation, you can visualize with the consort. Only visualization is different. Otherwise, it's almost exactly the same. procedure is same. Only different is the visualization. People who have received highest yoga tantra initiation. But the meditation manual that we are reading is without consort. So now here, Vajrasattva, Doje Sempa in Tibetan, Doje Sempa. Sattva in Sempa in Tibetan, Sempa refers to, in other words, being, Vajra being, Vajrasattva, Doje Sempa. Here, what is important part is the first one, Vajra, Doje, Vajra, Doje. So it has many different explanations according to the different contexts. So here, the commonly, description about the Vajra in Tibetan, Dorje, is in Tibetan, Dorje ne Yermicheba. So Yermicheba, in general description, what's called inseparable, cannot be separated, inseparable, Dorje, Yermicheba. Or sometimes translated indestructible, cannot be sort of separate. That's also similar meaning, Dorje. So here, the mainly refers to the two things which is inseparable. That inseparability manifests into this particular form. Form here, a single white, the figure. What is that? Those two, which are inseparable, So quite often, in the Vajrayana teachings, we'll say, Dojine taptam, Tibune sherabde. Dojine tap, tap. Vajra means what you call the methods or skillful means. Dojine taptam. Tibune sherabde, bell, that bell, ringing the bell is wisdom realizing emptiness. So here the method, the term that I use, is referring to, the what's called the, great bliss, and wisdom is referring to wisdom realizing emptiness. And this case, in particular, so wisdom, or wisdom here refers to, wisdom realizing emptiness. These two, the great bliss and wisdom realizing emptiness, these two in one entity, which is inseparable entity. Wisdom, great bliss with the wisdom realizing emptiness. These two, which are inseparable entity, which are in a state of inseparable entity, is called Vajra. So in other words, wisdom, great bliss and wisdom realizing emptiness are in one entity, inseparable nature. That is Vajra. Why it is called Vajra in this case? There are two meanings. It is called that kind of union, that kind of inseparability nature is called Vajra because these two are, when these two, bliss, great bliss and the wisdom realizing emptiness, these two become in one. And that one, that kind of oneness, which cannot be separated, and in that sense, it is also called Vajra, Dorje, but it is also called Vajra. That union of bliss and emptiness, that union is the most powerful to eradicate the root of samsara, which is deep-rooted self-grasping, deep-rooted self-grasping. So the union of bliss and emptiness, union of bliss and emptiness. When we say emptiness, it is talking about union of that bliss which realizes emptiness, and that is what the emptiness is called. That union is the most powerful realization to tackle the root of suffering, which is the self-grasping, which is the root of suffering, which is sometimes called ignorance. So that union, bliss and emptiness, that union manifests into this form, the form that we are looking at here, deity form, manifest or embodiment of that union. That union is the most powerful antidote to tackle the root of suffering. So then it makes sense. It makes sense to talk about purification. When that kind of realization is cultivated within our mental continuum, then purification is automatic, because that due to arising or due to cultivation of that realization, union of bliss and emptiness, which is very much the Vajrayana teachings terminology, and which is very much explain how to cultivate that union in the Vajrayana teachings, not in the Sutrayana. Sutrayana talk about wisdom realizing emptiness as the main antidote, but Sutrayana teachings don't talk about great bliss, this union. So that is something which is useful to talk about. Vajra, Sattva, that means being. So that union of bliss and emptiness manifests into that aspect of that being. So it's called Vajrasattva. For example, the Bodhisattva. Yeah, the person or the people who have bodhicitta, those people are called Bodhisattva. They are called Bodhisattva because they have got bodhicitta in their mental continuum. Having bodhicitta, their mental continuum, those beings are called Bodhisattva. In Tibetan, Changchup Sempa. And here it's called Dorje Sempa, Vajrasattva. So that Vajra, that union of bliss and emptiness. Today I'm just using simple one. I'm not using any very, elaborated, just using that term. Many of you notice these terms quite well, have heard many times. Today I'm just using that term. I'm not explaining how that union is, cultivated and developed. I'm not saying those things today. I'm just using the term, that union of bliss and emptiness, which is the direct antidote to the root of the cyclic existence, which is the self-grasping. So that union manifests or into this aspect, and that is called Vajrasattva. Vajrasattva. So that is here, it is important. So before we do the visualization of Vajrasattva, is useful, helpful. What kind of being that we are visualizing in front of us? Are we visualizing a historical person? Or are we visualizing a particular person or particular being? Here, no. We are visualizing in front of us an aspect or an image, a being, an image of being, that being which is risen, which is risen from that union of bliss and emptiness. So that is really something important you to remember, and you can explore in the future to understand Vajrasattva. When people who also at the end of the text there is a translation of 100 syllable mantra. If you read the 100 syllable mantra, translation of 100 syllable mantra, then it makes sense. This recitation of 100 syllable mantra is powerful. It is not just the recitation, it is the meaning. When those meanings are really here, then it works. Also, I would encourage you to read that, what you call the mantra, 100 syllable mantra, the translation. I think it is at the end of the, it is at the end of the, the text, explanation of the mantra. Okay. So now then then it becomes visualization. Now we know what we are visualizing. Now the visualization itself. Visualization. But as I mentioned before, last week and today, to do the purification practice, you don't have to have this kind of very, what you call the fancy visualization. You can do without the visualization. What is important is those four powers, which we are going to mention more detail after, but here it is. But today, in this discussion, our purification explanation is done from the Vajrayana point of view. And from the Vajrayana, there are several different deities, that we can do. We are using the Vajrasattva deities meditation manual. So therefore, that is. So now visualization, the visualization. Visualization can be done in many different forms, many different ways. From the, some of you are familiar with what you call the the people who have done Foundation Buddhist Thought in the 6th module, Tantra module. At the end of that book, we have put this, the Cherishing practice, not with Guru Yoga, but symbol 6 deity, Cherishing 6 deities. The Dongbela, deity of emptiness, Daila, deity of sound, Yigela, deity of letter, syllable, Yigela, Sugila, Daila, deity of form, like that, those 6. First, simply visualizing visualizing or simply meditating on emptiness. Suddenly, out of the emptiness, hearing the sound of the mantra. In this case, Vajrasattva, Om Vajrasattva, or the hum, just hum. From the sound of the hum or sound of the Vajrasattva, then syllable Vajrasattva. So it becomes grosser and grosser and grosser. From the syllable, then the actual form aspect, like that. There are these kind of step by step bringing the visualization. Sometimes, that kind of step by step, visualizing deity is very, very helpful. I will not go one by one, those 6 steps, in the related to cherishing, although it is related to the cherishing, thousand-arm cherishing, but that process, the step can be applied to any other deity visualization. Any other deity visualization. It is difficult suddenly to visualize a image just suddenly above your head. Here it mentioned visualize about 4 inches above your head. Here it mentioned above your head on an open wide lotus. Or you can instead of visualizing lotus, first simply to visualize or to meditate on emptiness, and within the sphere of emptiness, within that kind of your sort of experience or your understanding of emptiness, then like a letter pum or sound of pum, and that sound of pum transform into letter pum. You can visualize in English or any kind of language, written letter that you are familiar with, and that letter pum gradually transform into white lotus. You can do that kind of gradual process. And here it says, upon which is a moon disk, So on the lotus, moon disk, full moon disk, flat, like a cushion on the moon disk. Spend a little bit time to build those bases, lotus. Upon the lotus, what you call the moon disk. Upon the moon disk, here it says, the Vajrasattva is seated upon this. Instead of straightway to visualizing Vajrasattva, you can visualize syllable hum. Syllable hum. Or you can visualize syllable Vajrasattva. Vajrasattva. Then that can gradually transform into, a form of Vajrasattva, image form of Vajrasattva. So gradually, bit by bit, building visualization is very, very helpful. Very, very helpful. Maybe, as you know, there are many kinds of meditations when we do meditation. One meditation is called glance meditation. Instead of going everything detail, focus on particular topic. Initially, stage by stage, do bit by bit by bit, all the stages, but have like a what you call the, if you are sitting on a high mountain, then you are looking over the the valley. You can see all the small hills, valleys, houses, and all the things in the valley. So sometimes it is good to have that kind of understanding. Okay, I'm going to do the visualization of Vajrasattva. So to do the Vajrasattva, these are the building blocks to do the visuals. The letter palm, moon disk, syllable home. Then that transforms into Vajrasattva. Then at the Vajrasattva's heart, once again moon disk, and so on and so forth, bit by bit by bit. Initially, to have that kind of, like a people who never been to London Underground system, as soon as they got down there, they get lost and very difficult to know from which direction to go. So people who know the London Underground system, they have everything in their brain, in their, the groups, map. So similar to like that. Initially, to get sometimes useful to have that kind of picture, as I used earlier, sitting on a mountain, looking at the valley to see not everything very detailed, but see where are the waters, where are the rivers, where are the mountains, where are the houses, where. So like that, to familiarize ourselves with the building blocks of the visualization. Visualization. So that is something useful to learn how to do the visualization. And another way to learn the visualization, how to build the visualization is, starting from focusing at the one point, focusing at the one point. Like, for example, at the Vajrasattva's, here in this case, Vajrasattva, at the Vajrasattva's heart, on his, what you call the right hand, holding the Vajra at his heart, holding the Vajra at his heart, you can look at that. So focusing at the Vajra, really focusing there, and then slowly expanding the visualization, bit by bit by bit by bit. That's another way to do the visualization. It is up to the individual which one is more effective, a little bit easier, but it is useful. And also in here, another, in particular, when we do the Vajrayana practice, another important element in here is at certain stage, even if visualization is not very clear, must have this kind of strong, what is the right word? Believe, very sure, very sure you have Vajrasattva is seated on the moon and lotus above your head. Whether you get clear visualization or not, constantly sort of to reinforce that Vajrasattva, that deity which is the manifestation of that union of bliss and emptiness, manifest into that form, is seated upon the lotus and moon is above your head, 4 inches above your head. Sort of very, very, with, very like a, what is the right? Some traditions emphasize on this element which I've just mentioned. Sangha mebe zochewa. So they says, this is again statement in the Vajrayana. It says in the Vajrayana practice, that you are believing Vajrasattva. I'm using that term, but it's right or not, I don't know. Believing it is there is something important. That kind of certainty, without any hesitations, without any that kind of the hesitations, but certainly 100% that deity is seated on the lotus and montes above your head. That element is also very important. So, in other words, what you call the building visualization, and at the same time developing that kind of certainty that deity is above your head, which is important. In Tibetan, it's called merba. Merba, it has many different, two different, the meanings. For example, it has a meaning of aspiration. But here it is not the aspiration. The meaning closer to believing. You believe Vajrasattva is seated. So that is really important element in the Vajrayana teachings, in the Vajrayana practice. Okay. So today we will leave it here. We'll leave it here. So we will say the 21 Tara prayers and the dedication. On Geshe Pamadoma Cha Se Tanze Doma Nyuma Pa Jene Geje Lada Dram Jigde Sumgun Chuye She Kesara Chewa Lenin Dong Chanze Dongge Tawa Kawa Jene Zibe Shele Kama Dongda Soba Rabdo Chewe Rambara Chanze Sengwe Chuni Peme Changme Nabara Chimba Zundu Kato She Soba Samde Ju Chanze Teshin Shebe To Taye Nabara Jawa Je Malu Paru Jimba To Jawe Seji Shindu Dem Chanze Toda Rao Yi Duda Choda Namka Kang Jigden Dompo Shabi Nende Luba Meba Guba Nem Chanze Jajin Mela Tang Longla Naso Wanju Che Jumbo Rala Tesa Namanda Nijun Soji Dune Dem Chanze Jeje Chadang Peje Paru Chugo Rap Egon Yendang Shabi Nende Never Tuba Shindo Barama Chanze Turi Jiba Chen Didi Bao Number John Chuge Shene Tony Dance Dao Tamje Malus Chanze Kunjo Sumze Chaki Seme Toga Number Jam Malu Choji Kolo Jambe Rangi Vegi Sonam Tum Chanze Rabdo Kawaji Ujin Vegi Chengwa Belam Shibara Che Tuda Rai Dudan Jigden Wangdo Zem Chanze Sashi Jongwe Son Tamje Guba Numa Nim Tony Yawa Yige Hong Pumba Tamje Nabara Dom
Changze Tawe Dombo Oje, Gemba Tamje Shindo Param, Rebe Trene Labane, Tabare Shindo Rabusem, Changze Gebe Tamane, Barwe Tenwe Wine, Ejan Yugum Gune Koro, Daye Pungne Nambara Jong, Changze Sashi Ngola Changi, Tilji Nujin Shabji Dong, Chonyi Jenze Yige Hong, Rinpa Tumbo Namni Gema, Changze Dema Gema Shema, Nyangen Deshin Ju Nyema, Sowa Omda Yanda Dembe, Diwa Jembo Jomba Nyema, Changze Gune Kora Kawe, Diwa Jembo Changze Gune Kora Kawe, Daye Lune Nabara Gema, Ige Jubu Ngani Gube, Rikwa Hule Toma Nyema, Changze Dure Shamne Tabe, Ponge Nabe Sabe Nyema, Rera Menta Rada Beche, Jigen Sumna Yowa Nyema, Changze Vaye Soye Nabe, Rita Tajen Chana Nabe, Tara Nijue Peje Yeke, Duna Malu Pane Sema, Changze Lai Sonam Gebo, Lada Miam Ji Demo, Gune Goja Gawa Ji, Zeda Melomanian Basema, Changze Nima Tawa Jebe, Jinye Bola Rabasema, Hara Niju Tudarai, Shindo Taku Rimne Sema, Changze Tini Sumnam Gebe, Shive Tuda Yanda Dem, Duda Rona Nujun Sonam, Jomba Dure Rapcho Nyema, Zawe Ngaji Deba Deda, Changze Wane Nishu Zaji. Gewa Di Jiu Senama Yishe Cozo Senama Yishe Lechong Tamba Kunye Toba Chanjo Semcho Rinpoche Ma Che Bana Ma Che Jo Che Jeba Nyamba Meba Yang Kone Kondo Pewara Kanri Rawe Korwe Shinkamande Penda Dewa Malu Jungwe Jenre Sewa Tenzin Jato Shabe Sede Pado Tenjoro Che. Oh yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you,
Thank you
Geshe-la.
very,
Thank
very,
you.
very Thank you so much, Geshe-la.
Thank you.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Thank you,
Geshe-la.
Thank you so very much. Thank you, Geshe-la.
Thank you, Geshe-la.
Thank you.
Thank you.